Addiction is the maladaptive attempt to escape from the mental bondage of self. Paul Hederman, contemporary teacher of addiction and non-duality. This source, when experienced deeply through meditation, is not only profoundly peaceful, but also an ocean of solutions. David Lynch, filmmaker. In life, you make mind. In death, mind makes you. Tibetan Buddhist saying. Tibetan Buddhism includes within its teachings a very interesting concept, that of the hungry ghost, known as yidags in Tibetan. One possible form of hungry ghost can be a person that has died while still in the midst of intense craving or addiction. Tibetan Buddhists believe that at death, one sheds only the physical or gross form. The subtle and causal forms of the body remain. This means that while one is now free of the gross or physical body, they are still in the grip of the subtle body, or mind, that they made during their lifetime. The causal body will retain the seed of the addiction and carry it into the next life if it is not purified. Thus, those who die in the grip of addiction or craving often remain in the physical plane as disembodied hungry ghosts. That is, they are still gripped by insatiable addiction, but now without the physical body that would give them any chance of satiating that addiction. Those with the apparent ability to perceive disembodied spirits can perceive hungry ghosts. These people claim that in those places such as the red light districts of many cities, where people gather to drink, have sex, or use drugs, three of the most common pursuits of human addiction, hungry ghosts can be seen to collect, often in great numbers. Particularly in these places, disembodied hungry ghosts hover around the embodied, trying to influence them to drink, take drugs, or engage in sex in a desperate but ultimately failing attempt to vicariously quell their torturous cravings. According to Tibetan Buddhist teachings, hungry ghosts continue this until the energy of addiction has been exhausted in their subtle bodies, and they can finally move on from the physical realm to rest as the causal body until rebirth. From the point of view of the Tibetan Buddhist, addiction is therefore a very serious matter, not just in this life, but also for whatever follows the death of the body. Regardless if one shares this vision or belief in hungry ghosts or not, the trap of addiction and the severe suffering that it can cause in this life, not only for oneself, but also those around them, is undeniable. Addiction is complex. It transcends mere substance or behavioral abuse. Addiction is defined as a chronic and relapsing disorder. It is characterized by compulsive seeking, continued use, and a lack of control. This continues despite often severe adverse consequences. Fundamentally, addiction involves changes in the brain's reward system. The repeated exposure to addictive substances or behaviors leads to neuroadaptations. This diminishes the brain's sensitivity to natural rewards and drives one in the compulsive pursuit of the addictive stimulus. In the digital age, behavioral addictions related to technology and social media have also begun to take hold. Neuroimaging studies suggest parallels between substance and behavioral addictions, and to addictions to technologies. All of these addictive behaviors can hijack the brain's reward circuitry. From a spiritual perspective, addiction is understood in a far more radical manner. It is fundamentally understood as a deeply felt disconnection from one's real, empty self. From this point of view, it transcends the physical, psychological, and even neurological understandings. Rather, it addresses addiction at the core of both human consciousness and one's spiritual dimension of being. It is seen as a manifestation of a type of soul sickness, a spiritual pathology. Addiction from this point of view is the attempt to overcome the inherent pain in believing the sense of being a separate self is real. This false sense of being a separate self hurts. Thus, the pursuit of substances or addictive behaviors is understood as a misguided attempt to heal or overcome the pain of this feeling of separation, not only from the world, but from one's own being. The cyclic nature of addiction, a continual round of extreme but temporary highs followed by profound lows, allows for no permanent or abiding relief. Spiritual approaches to addiction often involve practices that encourage a surrendering of the sense of separation, which coincidentally connects one to their higher power. This may be enacted through prayer, meditation, mindfulness, or spiritual rituals. However, all of these are at their core ways in which to surrender the sense of separate self, transcend the limitations of the ego, and thereby rekindle one's connection with the sacred. From a spiritual point of view, overcoming addiction is not merely about abstaining from substances or behaviors. Rather, it is a practice and a journey of both healing and self-discovery. It involves coming to an understanding of the falseness of separation and the nurturing of a deep interconnectedness with all of existence. In essence, it is the rediscovery of an always already prior sacred connection to a higher power that transcends the neurological mechanics of addiction. Perhaps one of the most dangerous and hard to overcome addictions is that of an addiction to alcohol. Even the sudden stopping of alcohol can be extremely dangerous for an addict, as the withdrawals from alcohol, unlike heroin and other dangerous drugs, can be fatal. One very successful approach to overcoming alcohol addiction has been Alcoholics Anonymous, known simply as AA. Alcoholics Anonymous is primarily a spiritual approach to addiction. It focuses on surrendering to a higher power, self-reflection, making amends, and compassionately supporting other addicts. AA's success lies not just in giving up alcohol, but in the development of spiritual connectedness. This spiritual approach to alcohol addiction utilized by AA can be traced back to a crucial encounter between Bill Wilson, one of AA's founders, and Carl Jung, the world-famous Swiss psychiatrist. Bill Wilson could not escape the relentless grip of his alcohol addiction. Traditional treatment methods had all failed him. He was in the depths of despair and very close to killing himself. Seeking a solution, Bill Wilson sought the advice of the great Carl Jung. Jung told Wilson that virtually none of his alcoholic patients ever recovered, that he had failed with all of them, except, Jung said, if they had a spiritual experience. Then there was a possibility. Jung had come to believe that a spiritual awakening was the only pathway to overcoming alcohol addiction. He believed that individuals suffering from addiction needed a profound shift in consciousness, a spiritual awakening that would enable them to break free from the patterns of self-destructive behavior. The essence of Jung's advice to Wilson was that traditional psychoanalytic methods were not sufficient for treating alcoholism. Only a spiritual awakening made escaping alcohol addiction a possibility. After this meeting with Jung, Bill Wilson would have his own transformative spiritual experience, what he later described as his white light moment. During this transformative episode, Wilson felt a powerful presence and a profound sense of peace and serenity. He described feeling lifted from the depths of despair, marking a sweeping shift in his consciousness. This spiritual experience became the catalyst for his recovery, inspiring him to abstain from alcohol and to begin Alcoholics Anonymous. This experience also inspired the spiritual program called by AA the 12 Steps. The 12 Steps reflect the understanding of spiritual awakening as told to Wilson by Jung. These are the 12 steps of AA. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. These steps, such as surrendering to a higher power, making amends, and seeking spiritual guidance, Jung felt were necessary to bring about first an integration of the self, followed closely by a transformative spiritual experience. An integration of the self, which was at the core of overcoming any addictive behaviors. The incorporating of the spiritual dimension in overcoming addiction has led to the immense global success of AA. It has also inspired the success of innumerable other 12-step programs. Non-dualism is the notion that there is an ultimate, indivisible reality where distinctions and separations are perceived as utterly illusory. It stresses the interconnectedness of all existence, transcending dualistic thinking that categorizes experiences into opposing realms. In non-dualism, the boundaries between self and other, subject and object, dissolve, revealing an underlying unity. In the context of addiction, non-dualism provides a unique lens through which to understand the nature of craving and compulsive behaviors. Addiction often arises from a sense of separate self that is inherently painful. Non-dualism posits that the sense of separation, which fuels addictive tendencies, is illusory. The addict perceives a deeply isolating separation between themselves and the world. They then seek to overcome this isolation by finding solace in substances or behaviors. Non-dual teachings invite individuals to recognize the unity of their essence with the universe. This acts as a direct challenge to the ego-driven pursuit of pleasure and relief. Non-dual awareness works to help one realize that the true source of fulfillment lies not in external substances, but in the limitless and boundless unity of existence itself. Non-dual awareness can also disrupt the cyclical nature of addiction. This is because rather than succumbing to the polarities of pleasure and pain, craving and satisfaction, non-dual awareness allows one to experience the full spectrum of human experience with deep equanimity. Fundamentally, non-dual teachings stress the significance of present moment awareness. Present moment awareness becomes a gateway to the timeless reality of non-dual consciousness. Individuals are encouraged to observe their thoughts and emotions without attaching judgment. This non-judgmental observation promotes self-compassion and diminishes the need to escape uncomfortable experiences through addictive behaviors. It also grounds one in immediate experience. This immediacy stands always already prior to past regrets and/or future anxieties. This is crucial in breaking the cycle of addictive behaviors ingrained in escapism. It allows one to, in the words of AA, to live life on life's terms. Advaita Vedanta, a Hindu school of non-dualism, teaches the fundamental oneness of the individual soul, Atman, with the ultimate reality, Brahman. In the context of addiction recovery, this oneness suggests liberation from the illusion of separation that fuels addictive behaviors. Recognizing the inherent unity serves as a transformative paradigm for individuals seeking freedom from the chains of addiction. Central to Advaita Vedanta is the practice of self-inquiry, questioning the nature of one's identity. Ultimately, this allows one to see the falseness of the sense of separate self, freeing one from its inherent painfulness and thereby neutralizing one of the primary motivators of addiction. Zen Buddhism, another non-dual approach, highlights emptiness, sunyata, and impermanence, arnika. In addiction recovery, recognizing the impermanence of cravings and the emptiness of their ultimate fulfillment can help one greatly in releasing one from the grip of addiction. Zazen, the practice of seated meditation in Zen Buddhism, serves as a powerful tool. By cultivating mindfulness and concentration through Zazen, individuals develop the capacity to observe thoughts and sensations without attachment. This practice aligns with the non-dual perspective. Addicts begin to transcend dualistic notions of pleasure and pain. This allows them to rest in the present moment. It is cultivating that state of deep rest in what is as it is, which can literally erase the cycle of addictive behavior. Advaita Vedanta and Zen Buddhism both introduce the recovering addict to profoundly healing non-dual perspectives. Perspectives that promote oneness, self-inquiry, emptiness, and impermanence, all which help one to realize the transformative potential of non-dual awareness. Virtually every action one takes is to solve the problem of me. Addiction is no different. It is only a more extreme form of action. An extreme form of repetitious action that cuts deep neurological pathways into the brain. Eventually, those pathways are cut so deep that they become unavoidable and virtually inescapable. Both Carl Jung and non-dualism approach addiction in similar ways. They both suggest that the solution to the problem of addiction is to transcend the sense of separate self or painful contraction and problem of me-ness. However, there is a difference. Jung attempts to solve the problem of me by working to integrate the different aspects, what he called archetypes, of the me or human psyche, so that the me is no longer at war with itself, and thereby realizes a self-transcending wholeness. A self-transcending wholeness which initiates a spiritual awakening and radical shift in consciousness. A shift in consciousness so far-reaching that it also shifts patterns of addictive behavior. Non-dualism's approach is also to come to a solution to the problem of me, or the painful contraction at the core of addictive behavior. But it does so not by integrating the self, as in Jung, but by penetrating the purely illusory nature of self, or me, thereby rendering it null and void. Non-dual awareness, as found in spiritual traditions such as Advaita Vedanta and Zen Buddhism, heals the pain of separateness, the pain at the core of addiction, and brings about a recognition of the intrinsic unity with what is. Groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous, while highlighting the importance of a spiritual awakening brought about by integrating the self, as in Jung, also suggest a thorough surrender to something greater than oneself, greater than the mind-forged illusory limitations of one's me. The mistake that people often make about addiction is that it is a failure of willpower. It is exactly the opposite. It is an over-reliance on willpower. Addiction is an attempt to have complete control over how one feels, what one feels, and when one feels it. AA and other 12-step programs recognize this, and so strongly suggest handing the control of one's life to a God or higher power of their understanding. This concept of letting go and letting God reflects an acknowledgement that addiction extends beyond a mere lack of personal resolve. This does not diminish personal responsibility. Rather, it recognizes the need for a power beyond the me, if one is to escape the clutches of addiction. At its core, addiction is simply a highly dysfunctional attempt to solve a spiritual problem. A spiritual problem shared by the vast majority of people, addicts or not, the painful contraction of the illusory me.
Nacha